Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 25th of November 2023. I'm so sorry, I am somewhat late today. I was out for a lot of yesterday, bit of a late one last night, and so here I am. No football match for one of my boys, so instead of getting on and doing videos, I had a lie-in, a really, really rare lie-in. Never happens. Brilliant. Okay, so whatever. Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before look like this. All the usual caveats for these figures are in the description to the video below. 860 personnel is lower by the tune of sort of 250 from yesterday, but still a significant number. We see a dip in the equipment numbers in terms of what has been lost. 6 tanks, 7 APVs, certainly not the 30s that we saw yesterday, and that could indicate weather conditions playing a part or just a dip in activity across the front lines. Probably the former rather than the latter. It's not like they randomly take quiet days now and again, although it could still be the case, I guess. 18 artillery systems, lower, but still a fairly hefty number. 1 MLRS, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, 8 drones and 1 cruise missiles. Definitely not from last night. Night before, they had a massive drone attack last night into Ukraine. 29 vehicles and fuel tanks is still a significant effect taken on the vehicles and fuel tanks, on the logistics that the Russians are attempting to do. And 4 pieces of special equipment. That could be any sort of equipment from excavators and deminers to electronic warfare and ISR, probably the latter rather than the former. Okay, so as you can see, that's still going to hurt the Russians, but it's not the highest that we've seen, certainly not the lowest either. Then when we look to Andrew Perpetua's listing, we can see goodness, and this probably shows a catch-up from yesterday's activity, or at least the figures claimed from yesterday, which will actually refer to the day before. So we're probably starting to see this stuff filter through. I was listening to Andrew Perpetua's live stream last night. I think it was on there, where he was talking about one drone operator had just not been recording any of the stuff he had done, and was asked by seniors or by someone, I can't quite remember the anecdote, but it's this idea that he had all this footage that he had never kind of recorded and therefore uploaded. It's like, oh, do you want me to start recording this now? So yeah, that'd be useful. So it makes you realize that, as I've said many times before, there are lots of reasons why this is only ever going to be a reflective snapshot of what has taken place. It's not going to be exhaustive. It will skew towards drone footage rather than artillery hits and whatnot that aren't always filmed. But when it comes to the drones, the thousands of drones that are being used up and down the front line on a weekly basis, it's that you are only going to see a fraction of what has taken place. And that's always going to be the case. So we're never going to see a one-to-one representation of the losses claimed, where you've got you've got units that are saying, right, here's the evidence for this, here's the evidence for that, and then that gets submitted to the general staff, and then they release these figures. But only a fraction of those people giving the evidence to general staff are then going to be uploading that and getting that out into the public information spaces. So it's really important to remember that. Anyway, as you can see, this is a huge loss to the Russians, and I guess a ratio of maybe 5 to 1, something like that, maybe 6 to 1 even. But nonetheless, yeah, a bad day for the Russians, definitely. Okay, so for the Ukrainians, we can see that a radar system, ST-68 radar, was hit by a missile. So that's been destroyed, and I don't know how high value that is, but I imagine that's not going to be good for the Ukrainians. A Crab self-propelled howitzer being damaged by a Lancet, and you can see that 4 Lancets taking out 4 bits of artillery there. Lancets are becoming a nuisance again. And when we go to look at the Russian stuff loss, it's just an awful lot of equipment, a lot of FPV drones and other drone activity. That's broadly, oh goodness, okay, you've got Gimlers there. Unknown cause for some of these. But otherwise, if it's not unknown or there's a mortar there, one gimlet, one mortar, everything else looks to be drone or unknown. Everything else looking to be drone is just incredible how prevalent drone activity is. Right, 3 surveillance and comms stuff taken out. Artillery, three multiple launch rocket systems, and a TOS-1A thermobaric munition there. That is, going to be high value. Those MRS more so than just D30 artillery pieces. Then you've got a T90M tank that was in Kherson, I think. A T80BV, T62, T72 BVM. Sorry. Then you've got a whole bunch of IFVs and APCs, infantry fighting vehicles and armored personnel carriers. And then we get onto your logistics, trucks and civilian stuff. So just a whole range of things taken out, but just a lot of them as well. This is another bad day at the office for the Russians. Now, if that happens on a continued basis, then Russia will lose a war. That happens every day going on forward. 5-1 loss ratio, 6-1, 5 or 6-1. That's what Ukraine need to prevail. When it drops down to even 2-1, you might think that's bad for the Russians, and it is bad for the Russians, but it's probably not enough for the Ukrainians to make the difference they need. It needs to be continued days like that. Okay, destruction of the T90 here in Krinky area by left bank or on the left bank of the Dnipro River. This is a very key area. One of the bridgeheads the Ukrainians have that they're trying to expand, and that is a T90 getting taken out as it tries to hide in some trees. Then we have this as well. This is a column of 9 pieces of military equipment taken out near Avdiivka. This looks to be a new one, so it is worthy of note. And there's quite a few bits of equipment noted here from a kind of MRAP, it seems, with a turret on top, across to tank by the looks of it, and then something that's very much destroyed. Or was that an IFV? I don't think that's an IFV, actually. And sorry, it's swinging around. It's hard to focus on it. Yeah, IFV. And something on its side. Yeah, basically, a lot of destruction here. Time for a tea break. Just so you can look at some more, I don't know, destroyed Russian kit. So that is what I have for the losses, hits and losses. We are moving into distant strikes, and we have a significant night last night. We had a really significant night. It was a special day in Ukraine's history, says Tim White. Russia launched what was numerically the biggest ever aerial attack in terms of drones. That is, 75 drones were fired at the terrorist state, along with one Kh-59 missile. Air defense shot down 71 drones, but there were casualties. There are different stats here. Actually, here Ukraine battle map says 74 out of the 75 were shot down. So almost a 100% interception ratio. That is correct. 98.6% of the drones were shot down, 100% of the missiles. That is very significant. That also, well, first thing I thought when I saw this is like, oh, Russia missed an opportunity there. Really, if I was Russia, I'd have been doing that and 70 cruise missiles. You would absolutely overwhelm the air defenses of Ukraine, and I'm sure, that's what. Well, we know that's what they were doing last year when they were doing their biggest attacks. It was a lot of drones and a lot of missiles. But the lack of missiles is interesting. Why would that be? This would really overwhelm the air defenses. Now, it's also worth noting that you've got 75 drones when the highest we've probably seen, and correct me if I'm wrong, is probably in the 40s, 40 to 50 range. So that's a significant increase in the number of drones, and that could be because they are receiving or producing, according to Max 23 here, which is referring to another pro-Ukraine source, quote, Russia can produce or receive 700 to 1,000 Shaheeds in a month. The 75 sent in one night is essentially like a tenth, maybe, of what they can produce in that month. In other words, they can do what they did last night 10 nights in a row. That would be scary. It depends how they probably can't, because when they receive that or produce that in a month, it's not all in one. But if they were to stockpile a month's worth, then goodness me. Yeah. But you would produce them over the month, so it's not that you could do them 10 nights in a row, is my point. But nonetheless, that is a really significant number of drones that they can get their hands on. Over the past 6 months, a couple of thousand more have been accumulated. Winter will be hard. We must not be under illusions, but we have already been through it. We have endured, and we will endure. So while I've said a number of times that they're in a much better position, the Ukrainians, this year than they were last year, the same can be said for the Russians as well, at least in terms of drones. But they have their own production capacity of drones, and they seem to have a fairly well lubricated logistics line to Iran as well. Add those two together, and while the air defenses are better for the Ukrainians and the network is has much greater coverage over the country, the Russians can throw more drones at that better air defense system. Now, Zelensky has said that the Russians' attack last night was particularly poignant because it's Holodomor, Memorial Day, and he calls it deliberate terror. Over 70 kamikaze drones were launched the night dedicated to remembering the victims of Holodomor genocide. Deliberate terror. Russia's leadership is proud that they can kill. And indeed, we are starting to see drones that are being painted black or darker colours so they can't be seen in the night sky. Traditionally, they've just been white or grey. For the first time, so when you look up in the normal daytime sky, often has clouds, much more difficult to see them. Well, actually, at night time, you need a different colour. These won't be useful in the daytime; then would be more easily seen. But it's just horses for courses, painting the ones you're going to use at night in this colour, the ones you're going to use in the daytime in a different colour. Painted in dark colour so they can't be seen in the night sky. Now, why haven't we therefore seen Russia send 70 cruise missiles at the same time as 70 of these drones? Well, the UK intelligence says something that I've talked about before. Russia's Black Sea Fleet's ability to use its Novorossiysk base to reload vessels with cruise missiles is likely to become a significant factor in the fleet's operational effectiveness. Traditionally, Black Sea Fleet has reloaded cruise missiles in Sevastopol and Crimea, with that facility increasingly held at risk by Ukrainian long-range missiles, or long-range strikes, Russia will highly likely see Novorossiysk as the best alternative site. However, relocating and reloading the missiles would require new delivery, storage, handling, and loading processes. On November the 13th, 2023, the Ukrainian military channel claimed that Russia had paused firing maritime cruise missiles because of, quote, logistical problems at Novorossiysk. Russia will likely seek to expedite overcoming such issues in time for maritime cruise missiles to be included in any winter campaign of strikes against Ukraine. Wow, okay. This is hugely significant because, one, this is a win for Ukraine. Right, imagine if last night's 75 Shahed drone attack included 75 cruise missiles. The overwhelming wave, the effect that would have had on air defense systems, it would have overwhelmed the air defense systems, you would have thought. They had an almost 100% success rate against the drones, still causes trouble as those drones fall to the ground, and we'll see that. But my goodness, if you're exhausting your air defenses in taking out 75 drones over Kiev, imagine 75 cruise missiles on top of that too. So why didn't Russia do that? Well, this is the best explanation. Nothing else particularly makes sense. Although, what about the air-launched missiles from Russia? I don't know what would explain that, unless there have been hits on Russian air bases that have done more damage or caused more relocations than we were aware of. I'm not sure. However, putting that to one side, parking that issue, the Novorossiysk issue certainly looks to be really important and is a success for the Ukrainians. Now, as soon as they get that capability back, you can rest assured they'll be firing them at Ukraine. So here we have some information about the damage that was done with falling drones. This is somewhat earlier, I think. Yeah, this is a good few hours ago, so the stats have changed since then. Kiev was particularly badly hit with an astonishing... Oh, no, it may be that there were 66 at Kiev and the rest were flying at other places. Fired at the capital. 5 civilians were injured. The youngest just 11, the oldest 65. None is thought to be seriously injured. So that's really good news. As you can see, when they fall to the ground, unfortunately, even if you do hit them, they cause damage. Right? This is not cool. So he says there's a video of the scene of the worst damage in Kiev. This is the Solomiansky district of the capital. A kindergarten and apartment blocks were damaged. And actually, it's a real shame about the kindergarten. There's a lot of... if it's here somewhere, there's a video. I've got it here. Tears in Kiev as those who run the kindergarten see how Russia has ruined their building and the children's things. Obviously, the important military target, those giant teddy bears, can be lethal. Now, one presumes this is from falling Shahed drones as opposed to a genuine target. However, that's still morally repugnant that Russia are sending in drones into a capital city, right? So you have to shoot them down. But this is Russia's fault, right? So that's number one. Number two, they have been targeting or at least even more indiscriminately hitting civilian targets like the children's library in Kherson that was struck yesterday by shelling, right? And that is not something that's pushed off target by air defenses. And the Russians are doing that. And Andrew Perpetua had a bit of a rant last night, correctly so, on his live stream, always worth watching, where he... I think when he's on his own and he doesn't have the positivity of someone like Exit, to bounce off, he gets more irate with just how despicable the Russians are, and I totally get that. And he had a bit of a rant about, and he's like, why isn't the mainstream media not reporting this more when the Russians are targeting these civilian points along the Dnipro River on a daily basis and elsewhere, of course. Why is this not being reported? And he showed the brilliant children's library. It's such a well-equipped and well-done-out children's library. Delightful place, hit by shelling. And you're like, this is making me get angry now. So totally with Andrew on that one. Just really is frustrating. And my goodness, just everything needs to be done to get Ukrainians everything they need to defeat this evil. And it's so bloody obviously good and evil, right? Good guys and the bad guys. The Russians are the bad guys, just end of. And anyone that thinks even remotely differently is just a plum tool as far as I'm concerned. Just right, here we go. Kherson, earlier today, photos were released of the children's library that's been destroyed by Russia. Just another war crime. The first photo shows it how it used to look. And actually inside, it was beautifully decorated, children's library. And it's been, completely done over. Just an absolute disgrace, in my humble opinion. But anyway, that is... sorry, I've now gone completely off where that was. It'd be frustrating when that happens. There we go. So that's it, children's library. There is a video of it inside, which shows you how wonderful it was, and then images of it inside as well, which such a shame. Now, with regard to the Kiev attacks, we've had 2 visiting dignitaries there overnight, and actually, that's probably a good thing that they were there to experience the threat of a drone attack, in this case, of air raids going off. Particularly the Swiss leader. I don't wish that people have uncomfortable existences, right? But actually, if you're going to have anyone in Europe, maybe that apart from Viktor Orban that is experiencing this, maybe the Swiss leader, maybe the Austrian leader would be a good one. So Alain Berset is attending. He's the president of Switzerland, is attending the International Summit on Food Security. I don't want to be unkind, says Tim White, but I hope he heard the alarms and saw the devastation as he arrived and can remove the block on weapons for Ukraine. Absolutely. Of course, he might have opinions on weapons being released to Ukraine, but unfortunately, Swiss Constitution and Swiss Parliament will have an awful lot to say about that Uh, but also during a massive shelling of Kyiv, Latvian President Edgars Rinkovics was in the city. Now, he won't need any convincing, really. The Baltic states are doing such a marvelous job of supporting Ukraine, in terms of as a percentage of GDP and defense budget spending. Just, yeah, it is. That's not really an issue. However, this will solidify any thoughts, I guess. Now, yesterday I reported on a base getting hit overnight. That was 2 nights ago. That was in Jankoy, occupied Crimea. An air defense launcher and radar complex was destroyed, apparently, as a result. So that's going to be really high value stuff taken out North Crimea over a logistics hub and an airbase. So that's a really significant strike if that is indeed what was taken out. So radar complex and air defense launcher were destroyed as a result of an attack on a Russian military unit. Russian MOD reports that several drones were shot down, while rescuers on the spot talk about at least 4 explosions. There were claims of 7 explosions as well there. And then as well, the strike in Volgograd, yes, again, 2 nights ago, attacked by drones. According to a publication, this military unit is a large arsenal of complex ammunition storage. Quote, as a result of the explosion, a fire broke out on the territory of Warehouse 59, where small arms ammunition was stored. This is then talked about again by Peacedale 11. Today, a drone fell on the territory of 57222951 in the village of Kotluban around 2 a.m. The military unit, according to open data, is a large arsenal for the complex storage of ammunition. There were no casualties or damage. On the 16th, the same military unit was already attacked by a drone, as a result of which, as Astra reported, the warehouse with small arms ammunition burned down. According to Astra, 630 people were evacuated from the territory of the military unit. So this has been targeted twice. What's significant there is it was hit and then hit again. This is the sort of place where you'd think, well, if you had 75 Shaheeds, imagine what you could do to someone like that. And that shows the asymmetry between the two nations in terms of access to large amounts of distance drones. I guess Ukrainian capacity is increasing in that respect, but the problem for the Ukrainians maybe is that Russia's such a massive country and it's got many spread out targets that, where Ukraine have Kiev as a central city, and the Russians can go, right, let's send 75 drones at Kiev or whatever. You can concentrate that so much more. The Ukrainians must be looking at Russia and thinking, goodness me, well, we'll send a couple over there, send a couple over there, I don't know whether it's just worth saying, right, gather all your drones, don't send any for a week, send them all at this one base, completely take that base out. I don't know, but what do I know? Evidently not enough. So Trentelenko reporting here that prepare yourselves for future reporting of Iranian drones and or cruise missiles striking Diego Garcia. That's a kind of military base run by the Americans, is it? Is there British involvement there? Good, I forget. But anyway, it's kind of like you've got Diego Garcia's been, I suppose, exiled there as that's used as a kind of military base. Well, you can imagine that in the middle of the ocean being hit by Iranian drones now, because what they've done, well, apparently they've hit an Israeli-owned container ship in the Indian Ocean, hit by an Iranian loitering munition. Now, if that's happened, wow, that is, something of of an issue going forward. The attack comes just days after Houthi rebels in Yemen, Iranian proxies, hijacked a partly Israeli-owned ship in the Red Sea, taking 25 hostages. These conflicts can spread their, insidious tendrils into about the globe, I guess. It's that's a challenge going forward. Right, moving on to other bits and pieces. We'll start with this. I reported this yesterday in my frontline update, but it's worth mentioning in the news. In Ukraine, a working group on the construction of fortifications was created. This was announced by the head of the Ministry of Statistics, Mikhailo Fedorov. He seems to be the head of many ministries. The group will operate 24/7 as an operational headquarters and coordinate the efforts of all authorities and the military. I don't know why it's taken 2 years almost for this to happen, but it has. Anyway, good luck to them. What I presume is each military district has been planning and building their own fortifications and defences and trenches and whatnot. This is to oversee and more strategically plan the defences. But as I say, surely that should have been done a long time ago. Right, Russia has lost 76 passenger airplanes because of sanctions on the airline industry, complained Savalyev, the head of the Russian Transport Ministry. So this is the Russians admitting that their airline industry has been absolutely hammered by sanctions. We remind people that the EU has banned the supply of spare parts and civilian aircraft to Russia, as well as the insurance and maintenance services. And that is taking effect. Right, there's a piece in The Economist talking about Russia starting to make its superiority in electronic warfare count. Lots to be said about this. Let's join it a little bit further. We heard, General Zaluzhny talk about this being a priority, electronic warfare. Ukraine discovered in March that its Excalibur GPS-guided shells suddenly started going off target thanks to Russian jamming. Something similar started happening with the JDAM ER, so it's the guided glide bombs, and that's why we haven't seen them, I think, used so much. That America had supplied to the Ukrainian Air Force, while Ukraine's HIMARS-launched Gimler's long-range rockets also started missing their targets. In some areas, a majority of Gimler's rounds now go astray. Wow. So this is possibly why we're seeing fewer bits of footage on Gimler strikes, because they're not being as successful due to electronic warfare. Even more worrying has been the increasing ability of Russian electronic warfare to counter the multitudes of cheap unmanned aerial vehicles, drones that Ukraine has been using for everything from battlefield reconnaissance and communications to exploding on impact against targets such as tanks or command nodes. Ukraine has trained an army of some 10,000 drone pilots who are constantly engaging the cat and mouse game with increasingly adept Russian electronic warfare operators. The favoured drones are cheap, costing not much more than $1,000 each, and Ukraine is building enormous quantities of them, but losses to Russian EW, which either scrambles their guidance systems or jams their radio control links with their operators, have at times been running at over 2,000 a week. The smitten drones hover aimlessly over their batteries, run out, and then fall to the ground. Neither hardening them against jamming nor investing them with artificial intelligence to fly without a live link to a human operator are feasibly options yet, at least for mini drones. Quantity still wins out over quality. In other words, they're just using more drones to overcome the fact that they lose so many to EW. But Russia may have an advantage there too. The skies over the battlefield are now thick with Russian drones around Bakhmut. Ukrainian soldiers estimate that Russia is developing twice the number of assault drones they are able to. So this is something that, and they go and talk about this, the Russi report by Jack Watling and Nick Reynolds saying that the Russians have, greater... Well, let's read it. Growing Russian success in the drone war is partly explained by the density of EW systems it is able to field thanks to those years of investment. That's what it talks about right at the beginning of the article. A report published in May by Watling and Reynolds of Russi, a think tank in London, reckoned the Russians are fielding one major electronic warfare system every 10 kilometers along the front line. They think that among many Russian electronic warfare systems, the truck-mounted Shipovnik Aero, which is pictured, that thing. Where have you gone? Shipovnik Aero is proving especially deadly to Ukrainian drones. The system has a 10 kilometer range, and can take over control of the drone while acquiring the coordinates of the place from where it is being piloted, with an accuracy of 1 meter for transmission to an artillery battery. Wow. Starting from a much lower level of technical and operational skill, Ukraine is struggling to develop homegrown EW capabilities to match those of the Russians. Some progress is being made. The nationwide Pokrova system is being deployed. It can both suppress satellite-based navigation systems such as Russia's GLONASS and spoof them by replacing genuine signals with false ones, making the missile think it is somewhere it is not. Pokrova should be highly effective against the Iranian-designed Shahed loitering munitions, but less so against cruise missiles that rely more on terrain-matching systems, which compare the ground below to a library of stored images rather than being guided all the way in. As well as Pokrova, so-called Frankenstein systems cobbled together with typically Ukrainian ingenuity by combining Soviet systems with more modern technology are also making an appearance. But what is missing is much in the way of help from Ukraine's Western allies when it comes to EW contest with Russia. Mr. Jones says that as far as America is concerned, that is not likely to change. EW falls into a category of technology transfer restricted by an export control regime that is rigidly policed by the State Department. The Americans have really good, apparently, electronic warfare capabilities, as you would expect, right? Being at the top of the technological tree, I guess. But they are unable to, and perhaps unwilling to, give that really really well, highly regarded technology over to the Ukrainians. There's also this claim that it wasn't actually Watling and co-author and Reynolds, it was Rob Lee and Michael Kaufman talking about how the Russians have more drones than the Ukrainians are, saying that's probably not true everywhere. That's going to be partially true in certain places. So Bakhmut could be one of the areas where they do. What the Ukrainians will want is that to stop, that trend stopping. They need the Russians not to be able to bring so many drones, and the Russian electronic warfare capabilities to be hit. This is a worry going forward, definitely. You've seen how prevalent drones are. I've shown you the list of stuff that's been blown up and how much of that was due to drones. Well, if the Russians can do that, as well as the Ukrainians are doing that at the moment, then that's a game changer. That's Ukraine being in the shit, really. That is so important that the Ukrainians are able to do something about stopping that from happening. Zelensky asks his military to present a new mobilization plan. We've been wondering about this for some time. The Russians have their own issues with mobilization and are probably going to do a mass mobilization after the elections on March the 17th. But before that, they're doing crypto mobilization and they're getting hold of loads of prisoners. So they are getting around the issue to some degree. Ukraine will need to do this as well. And they have an issue with not having enough boots on the ground. Zelensky has instructed Commander-in-Chief Valery Zaluzhny and Defense Minister Rustem Umerov to present a new mobilization plan by next week, the president said. Right, every Russian with a smartphone is our best friend, comrade and client. So how the SBU blew up the Kerch Bridge. So this is some news coming out of a strike on June the 17th. Now, what's interesting about this, I'll just dip into this a little bit. I'll probably do this at length in an extra. But what they do is they look at open source information, mobile phone. I don't know, it's mobile phone data or stuff loaded up to the internet. But one of the sources of such information was a video recording of a Russian woman who rested in the area of the Crimean Bridge on a yacht and filmed the internal structure, the bridge arch, he says. And just look at this footage. You can imagine that this would be really useful as she shows exactly how the bridge is constructed. And all the details. It said this information gave us an understanding of where to attack the city to cause the maximum damage. Super useful, as that footage just says. It shows everything they need to know. But there you go. Anyway, that is probably worth looking into in a little bit more detail. Another point. So Chris Owicki says this probably reflects a current very high Russian casualty rates. Formal medical facilities, hospitals and field treatment centres are likely overwhelmed at the moment, just as they were at the peak of the fighting in Bakhmut earlier. I've shown you some footage of a hospital it wasn't a hospital, it's some kind of medical unit somewhere with like portaloos outside that was just bunk beds shoved into one big room, and it was terrible, not great conditions and very poor medical provision as well. Well, this guy talks about how, as a Russian serviceman, this is Dmitry from War Translated, from the 255th Regiment, recorded a video in an unclear, abandoned location where the badly injured Russian soldiers are kept before being released, quote, into the wild. This is how Russia treats its own people. So, you lose a leg, okay, you're not going to be sent to the front line. We'll treat you here for a little bit, and then we'll just let you go. Good luck. Thanks for your service there. Thanks for giving your leg to the project. We'll see you somewhere else. Goodbye. And again, this talks to the whole Russian military project and how well thought out it is, how well funded it is, how much they value the people, which is, in case you hadn't realised, not a lot. And Chris Owicki has a thread here. Cannibal serial killer who is said to have murdered 13 people and filled his refrigerator with human flesh has been, I'm sure I've read about this guy when it happened actually, has been pardoned by Vladimir Putin and sent to fight in Ukraine. The decision has caused shock in Russian social media networks. 44-year-old Denis Gorin from Aniva in the Sakhalin region has been tried 3 times for murder and cannibalism, most recently serving a 22-year sentence after being convicted of 3 murders in 2018. He appears to have signed a contract recently with the Russian MOD. I mean, so on and so forth. You get the point. Goodness me. I mean, 1, it shows that Russia are desperate for boots on the ground. 2, this is probably going to be at least somewhat counterproductive for public opinion. I'm sure public opinion won't be fully in support of this. And yeah, nonetheless, they are doing this crypto mobilization, and the desperation has caused them to seek personnel from places you probably wouldn't normally be looking. Right, that's the end of today's piece. Thank you for watching. Just a massive thanks to Michael, who is someone who has followed from Canada, and he sent me this T-shirt I'm wearing at the moment, a Retro Weezer T-shirt from his eBay shop. He was also sent me this Vancouver Canucks. If you see me wearing some Canadian retro gear, like, you know where it's come from. Thanks so much to him. This is a public thanks. I really appreciate that. It's really kind. Go and check out his eBay store. I'll put a link in the description below. Cheers, dude. And here, I said that I was away yesterday. You can turn off the video now, but if you want to see my boy opening, as many skaters did, they were the only group of skaters, though. He was the Grinch. He's dressed up superbly. Well done to my partner for doing that. The Portsmouth pop-up ice skating rink, they opened it last night anyway, so this is his performance.
I'm not scared. Then I should be expecting you're leaving.
Joining it about a third of the way through. Anyway, you get the point. That was all rather nice. Well done him, 13-year-old, doing all that with a range of ages for those dancing with him. But yeah, it's really cool. Just thought I'd show that to you. Whatever. Take care. Speak soon.